My name is Elias. I'm an environmental engineer by trade, which means I spend a lot of time in remote locations, surveying land, monitoring water tables, and generally being alone in places few people ever see. This story isn't one I tell often, because I'm not sure what I saw. I only know what I felt and what I heard. It happened 4 years ago in the Cascade Mountains of Washington State. I was assigned to a 3-week monitoring job in a particularly unforgiving section of the Okanogan Wenatchee National Forest, near a peak known locally as the Black Tooth. It wasn't a formal trail or a protected wilderness area. It was old-growth timber, steep scree slopes, and dense, tangled underbrush. My base was a small, prefab aluminum shack the company had flown in years earlier, situated on a narrow, exposed ledge about 5,000 feet up. It was strictly a sleeping and gear shed. All the work, the measurements, the charting, the sampling, was done outside. The first week was grueling but peaceful. My days were a rhythm of silence punctuated only by the scrape of my boots on rock, the click of my instruments, and the distant rush of a glacial melt stream. No cell service, no radio, just me and the mountain. The mountain felt alive, not in a cliché, hippy-dippy way, but in a heavy physical sense. It had moods. Some days the air was sharp and clean, the silence majestic. Other days, the atmosphere felt oppressive, the air thick with the smell of wet decay and ozone, even when the sky was clear. The change started on the 9th day. I was maybe 2 miles from the shack, working on a survey line that crossed a huge, ancient burn scar. The trees here were black, jagged skeletons against the sky. I stopped for lunch, sitting on a massive fallen log. That's when I heard the singing. It was faint, carried on a gust of wind, and utterly beautiful. It sounded like a woman's voice, a soaring, clear soprano singing a melody with no recognizable lyrics or language, just pure, mournful sound. It was the kind of music that makes your chest ache. I looked around. I knew the area. There were no hiking trails for miles. The nearest logging road was 10 miles away and unused. Who would be up here? And why were they singing like that? I tried to triangulate the sound. It seemed to be coming from higher up the ridge, maybe a few hundred feet above me. I called out, "Hello, is everything okay?" The singing stopped instantly. The mountain swallowed my voice whole. I waited for 5 minutes, listening, but only the silence returned. I chalked it up to an illusion, a strange echo from the valley below, perhaps a particularly clear recording carried by the wind. I finished my sandwich, packed my gear, and continued my work. But the next day, it happened again. I was crossing a section of rocky meadow. This time it wasn't singing, it was whispering. I was maybe 50 yards from a cluster of thick, dark pines. The sun was hot, the air still. The whispers were quiet, insistent, and seemed to be coming directly from the pine cluster. It wasn't one voice, it was several, a frantic, overlapping murmur of sound. They sounded like people arguing or perhaps mourning. I couldn't make out any words. It was the tone that mattered. It was steeped in distress and urgency. My skin went cold. I stopped dead, gripping the handle of my machete. I didn't call out this time. I walked slowly toward the pine trees, trying to move silently. As I got closer, the whispers grew louder, more frantic. It sounded like the voices were right there, just behind the curtain of needles. It was almost unbearable, the noise, a terrible chorus of pain and panic. I took one more step, and the voices exploded into a sharp, collective scream. It wasn't a human scream. It was too high, too thin, too long. It was the sound of something breaking. I stumbled back, heart hammering. I turned and ran, not back to the shack, but just away from the sound, leaping over roots and scrambling up the slope until I was out of breath and 1,000 feet away. When I finally stopped, the silence was back, complete, heavy, and absolute.
If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more dark horror stories like this one.
I didn't go back to that survey point. I told myself it was an auditory hallucination brought on by dehydration and isolation. But the mountain wasn't done with me. The phenomena became more frequent and more personal. It wasn't always voices. Sometimes it was crying. On the 12th night, I was sitting outside the shack, checking the weather readings, when I heard it. It was a weeping sound, low and inconsolable, coming from just below the lip of the ridge I was sitting on. It sounded exactly like a young child sobbing, hiccuping for breath. This was different. A child's cry is a universal trigger. I grabbed my powerful headlamp and a survival knife. "Hello!" I shouted, aiming the beam down the sheer slope. "Is anyone there? I'm coming down!" I started scrambling down the treacherous slope, calling out, "I'm with the Forest Service, can you hear me?" The crying stopped instantly, replaced by a sound that made my blood freeze. It was a slow, wet, deliberate thump followed by a soft, scraping drag. The sound was moving away from me, down the mountain. Thump, drag. The sounds were heavy, like something large and broken being pulled over rock. I stopped, my beam cutting uselessly into the shadows. The air was dead still. I could feel the cold radiating up from the mountain rock. I realized I wasn't hearing a lost child. I was hearing something else, something that was wounded, or maybe carrying a burden, and it was moving out of the light. I backed up slowly, keeping the beam focused down the slope, terrified of what I would see if I caught up. I retreated until I was back on the ledge, then locked myself inside the aluminum shack. I didn't sleep that night. I listened to the mountain, and the mountain spoke. Not with the singing or the whispers or the crying, it spoke with my voice. Around 3 a.m., I heard a sound from outside the shack's only window, a small, square portal. It was a man's voice, speaking in a low, earnest tone. It was me. "I need to leave now," the voice said, perfectly matching my timbre and inflection. "I can't stay here anymore. It's too cold." It sounded like I was reciting a line I had practiced. I hadn't said those words, not out loud. I held my breath, clutching the knife. Then the voice shifted. It became strained, frantic. It sounded exactly like me when I was terrified. "They won't stop singing," my voice whispered. "They won't stop looking." The terror was not that someone was outside. The terror was that the voice knew exactly what I was feeling, what I was thinking, and what I had experienced. It was mimicking my fear back to me. The voice started laughing, a terrible, hollow, gasping laugh that sounded like it was coming from deep within a canyon. It was my laugh. I spent the remaining hours until dawn pressed against the far wall of the shack, my eyes glued to the window. When the sun finally rose, casting long rays of pale, weak light across the jagged peaks, the laughing stopped. I was done. The job could wait. My sanity was more important than the data. I packed my bag in a frenzy, leaving the bulk of my equipment behind. I grabbed my satellite phone, which was strictly for emergency use, and my small provisions. I started the 10-mile hike out at 6 a.m. The final terror was the mountain's farewell. I was maybe a mile down the main logging path, walking as fast as I could. I looked down at my watch. 7:15 a.m. I heard it coming from the forest behind me. It was the collective sound of footsteps. Not one set, not two. It sounded like an entire group of people, maybe 10, maybe 20, walking in perfect, unified sync on the gravel path. Crunch, crunch, crunch. A solid, relentless sound of boots on stone. I didn't look back. I knew I couldn't outrun a large group of people on that steep terrain. I started running anyway, the panic overriding all caution. I ran until my lungs were screaming, my pack bouncing hard against my back. I glanced over my shoulder, just a quick flicker. The path was empty. The forest was dense, dark, and silent, but the footsteps didn't stop. They were still there, behind me, in the air. Crunch, crunch, crunch. They were maintaining a steady, impossible pace, always maybe 30 yards back, close enough to hear every stone shifting under their weight. I ran for another mile until I reached a massive, clear-cut scar. I scrambled over a pile of felled logs and jumped down into the thick, protective brush, diving into a ravine to hide. I lay there, chest heaving, listening. The footsteps stopped right at the edge of the clear-cut. The silence that followed was the heaviest I had ever experienced. It felt like 100 eyes were fixed on the ravine, waiting. I heard one final sound. It was the low, rattling sigh of the deer I had heard that first night. The sound of primal, absolute fear. Then, a voice, soft, low, and not quite mine, said, "Come back, Elias. You need to finish the work." I didn't move for 4 hours. When I finally dared to climb out, the mountain was back to its silent, heavy self. I finished the hike out and called my company. I told them there was a technical failure and that I wouldn't be returning. They asked for the equipment. I told them to go get it themselves. I didn't care about my job. I live in a city now, on the 10th floor of an apartment building, surrounded by noise. But sometimes, when I'm walking through a deserted park late at night, or if I'm the only one left in the office after dark, I'll hear something faint. It sounds like a single heavy boot stepping on gravel. Crunch. And I wonder if the voices on that mountain were lost hikers or something older. And I wonder which one of them knows my name well enough now to follow. I wonder if they're still walking and if they will ever stop.